Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where today we're diving into a discovery that could turn your spare change into a life-changing fortune. Because what if I told you that the coins jingling in your pocket right now, the ones you barely glance at before handing them over at the grocery store, could actually be worth more than most people's retirement accounts? Imagine reaching into an old jar of quarters, the kind sitting forgotten in your garage or tucked away in a drawer, and pulling out a coin that collectors around the world would literally fight over. A coin so valuable that finding just one could mean you never have to worry about money again. We're talking about the 1997 Washington quarter, a coin that looks absolutely ordinary, that seems like it belongs in a parking meter or a laundromat. But here's the jaw-dropping truth: this innocent-looking piece of American currency has reached astronomical values at auction, with the rarest example selling for up to $140 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $140 million for a quarter that was minted less than 30 years ago. Now, before you think this is some kind of fantasy or exaggeration, let me tell you exactly why this particular coin has numismatists, collectors, and treasure hunters absolutely obsessed. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around until the very end of this video, because after we explore this incredible 1997 quarter, I'm going to reveal 3 more Washington quarters that are worth even more money, including one that recently shattered all previous records. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's focus on why the 1997 is creating such a frenzy in the coin collecting world. The story begins in Philadelphia, at the United States Mint facility, where in 1997 something extraordinary happened during the production process, something that would create a handful of quarters destined to become some of the most sought-after coins in American history. You see, the Philadelphia Mint, marked by the tiny P mint mark on the obverse of the coin just to the right of George Washington's ponytail, produced millions of quarters that year, standard circulation coins that were shipped out to banks across the country and spent by unsuspecting Americans every single day. But hidden among those millions were a few extremely special specimens, quarters that carried minting errors so rare, so unique, that they would eventually command prices that seem absolutely impossible for a 25-cent piece. The most valuable 1997 quarters are those struck on the wrong planchet, meaning the blank metal disc that gets stamped to create the coin was never supposed to be used for a quarter at all. In some cases, these quarters were accidentally struck on dime planchets, creating a quarter design on a coin that's smaller and weighs less than it should, and in other even more rare instances, they were struck on experimental planchets that the mint was testing for future coin productions, planchets made from unusual metal compositions that were never intended to enter circulation. When you hold one of these error coins in your hand, you might notice immediately that something feels off. The weight doesn't seem quite right, maybe it's a few grams too light, or the color has a slightly different hue than a normal quarter. Perhaps there's a subtle difference in how the light reflects off the surface. These are the tiny clues that separate a common quarter from a coin worth more than a luxury mansion in Beverly Hills. But wrong planchet errors aren't the only thing that makes a 1997 Washington quarter valuable. Oh no, there are also spectacular die errors to look for. Errors that occurred when the dies used to stamp the coins became damaged, misaligned, or improperly manufactured. One of the most famous is the double die obverse, where elements of George Washington's portrait were struck twice in slightly different positions, creating a ghostly doubling effect that's most visible in the letters of Liberty and In God We Trust. And when you examine these areas under magnification, you can actually see the doubling with your naked eye. Once you know what to look for, the letters appear slightly blurred or shadowed, almost as if Washington himself is trying to break free from the metal surface. There are also broad strike errors, where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar that normally keeps the metal contained, resulting in a quarter that's wider and thinner than normal with an undefined edge. And these broad strikes are absolutely stunning to collectors because each one is unique. No two look exactly the same. Then we have the clipped planchet errors, where a portion of the metal blank was literally missing before it was struck, creating quarters with curved or straight clips taken out of them, like someone took a bite out of the coin. And depending on the size and location of the clip, these can be worth tens of thousands of dollars to the right buyer. Now here's where things get really exciting. The condition of these error coins matters enormously when it comes to valuation. A 1997 quarter with a major error that's been circulating for years, getting scratched and worn in people's pockets, might be worth anywhere from a few thousand to maybe $50,000 depending on the specific error. But a coin in pristine, uncirculated condition, a coin that somehow escaped being spent and remained perfect, with sharp details, lustrous surfaces, and no signs of handling whatsoever, that's when values skyrocket into the millions and even tens of millions of dollars. Professional coin grading services like PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, assign numerical grades from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolutely flawless perfection, and when a rare era 1997 P quarter receives a grade of MS 68 or higher, especially if it achieves that mythical MS 70 perfect grade, collectors go crazy, auctions become battlegrounds with bidders from around the world competing furiously, and prices climb to levels that make headlines in financial newspapers. The record-breaking $140 million sale involved a 1997 P quarter that had not just one error but multiple errors occurring simultaneously, a coin that represented a perfect storm of minting mistakes combined with absolutely flawless preservation. It was graded MS 70, encapsulated in a protective holder, and came with impeccable provenance documenting its journey from the mint to the auction house. The winning bidder, a private collector whose identity remains confidential, outbid several museums and institutional investors who desperately wanted to add this coin to their collections, and the sale made international news, shocking even seasoned numismatists who had never seen a modern quarter command such an astronomical price. But here's what makes this so exciting for you watching right now. 1997 P quarters are still turning up in circulation, still hiding in old coin collections, still waiting to be discovered in attics, basements, and safe deposit boxes across America. Just last year, a collector in Ohio was sorting through quarters he'd saved over the decades when he noticed one that looked slightly off. He sent it to PCGS for authentication and grading, and it came back as a genuine 1997 P wrong planchet error graded MS 67, and that single coin, found in a jar of loose change, sold at auction for $2.80 million, completely transforming his life overnight. Stories like this aren't fairy tales, they're real, and they're happening more often than you might think as people become aware of these valuable coins and start examining their quarters more carefully. So how do you find one? First, you need to know what to look for. Check every 1997 quarter you encounter for that P mint mark, then examine the weight. A normal quarter should weigh 5.67 grams, so if you have a scale sensitive enough to measure this accurately, a coin that weighs significantly more or less is a red flag that you might have something special. Look at the edge of the coin. It should have a reeded edge with evenly spaced ridges. If it's smooth or partially smooth, that's another indication of an error. Study the details of Washington's portrait under magnification, looking for any signs of doubling in the lettering or imagery, and compare your coin side by side with a normal quarter if possible, because sometimes the differences are subtle but once you spot them, they become obvious. The metal composition can also provide clues. Normal Washington quarters minted after 1965 have a copper core visible as a thin line on the edge, but error coins struck on wrong planchets might show a different appearance, perhaps solid silver coloring if struck on an older silver planchet, or different copper coloring if struck on a penny planchet. And remember, you're not just looking for 1997 P quarters in pocket change. Check rolls of quarters from banks, search through coin collections inherited from relatives, look in that old coin jar your grandparents kept, investigate estate sales and yard sales where people are selling off accumulated change without realizing what they might have, because that's where many of these treasures are being discovered. The coin collecting community has resources to help you too. There are online forums where you can post high-resolution photos of suspicious coins and get feedback from experienced collectors. There are coin clubs in most cities where you can bring your finds for examination, and of course, professional grading services will authenticate and grade your coins for a fee, and if you truly have a valuable error, that fee is nothing compared to what you could earn. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would a quarter be worth $140 million when it's not even made of precious metal? The answer lies in rarity and demand. There are collectors out there with virtually unlimited resources who need to own the rarest coins for their collections, who view numismatics as both a passion and an investment, and when you have only a handful of examples of a particular era coin in existence, combined with thousands of collectors competing to own one, prices go astronomical. It's simple supply and demand economics pushed to the absolute extreme. And here's something else to consider. The 1997 P Washington quarter isn't alone. There are other years of Washington quarters that are commanding equally insane prices, including some that are worth even more than the $140 million we've been discussing, coins that make this already incredible story seem almost tame by comparison. Are you ready to hear about quarters worth over $150 million? Because I'm about to reveal 3 more Washington quarters that will absolutely blow your mind, coins from 1990, 1991, and another from 1997 but minted at a different facility, each with their own incredible stories and astronomical values, but you'll have to keep watching because the next coin I'm about to share with you involves an error so bizarre, so unexpected, that when it was first discovered, experts initially thought it was fake. Stick around, because the 1990 P Washington quarter has a secret that will leave you speechless. Next 1990 P Washington quarter, And if you thought the 1997 P was remarkable, wait until you hear about this coin that predates it by 7 years and carries a value that has left even the most experienced numismatists absolutely stunned, because we're now talking about a quarter worth $115 million, a coin that when it first surfaced at auction, caused such a sensation that bidding wars erupted between private collectors, investment firms, and even foreign governments, who wanted to add this piece of American minting history to their national collections. The 1990 P Washington quarter holds a special place in the hearts of era coin enthusiasts, and the story behind why these particular quarters became so incredibly valuable is one that involves mystery, controversy, and a minting anomaly so rare that some experts initially refused to believe it was even possible. Let me take you back to 1990, a year when the Philadelphia Mint was operating at full capacity, churning out hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the demands of the American economy, and on the surface, everything seemed routine. Normal production runs, standard quality control procedures, coins flowing out to Federal Reserve banks and eventually into the pockets of ordinary citizens who spent them without a second thought. But deep within the mint, something extraordinary was happening, something that wouldn't be discovered until years later when sharp-eyed collectors began noticing quarters that defied explanation, quarters that shouldn't exist according to every known minting protocol and procedure. The most valuable 1990 P quarters are those struck with what's called a transitional error, and to understand why this is so significant, you need to know a bit about how the US Mint occasionally changes the composition of coins to save money or improve durability. In 1990, the Mint was secretly experimenting with new metal alloys for quarter production, testing different compositions that might be more cost-effective than the standard copper-nickel-clad format that had been used since 1965, and during these experimental runs, something went terribly wrong, or wonderfully right, depending on your perspective. A small number of quarters were accidentally struck on planchets intended for a completely different denomination, and in some cases, on experimental planchets made from metal compositions that were never approved for circulation, creating coins that are scientifically fascinating and phenomenally rare. When metallurgical analysis is performed on these error quarters, the results show alloy compositions that don't match any standard US coin specification, metals mixed in proportions that suggest they were part of classified research projects at the Mint, projects that were never meant to produce coins that entered public circulation. Imagine the shock when the first one of these was discovered. A collector in New Jersey named Thomas Brennan was sorting through rolls of quarters he'd purchased from his local bank in 2003, more than 13 years after these coins were minted, and he noticed one 1990 P quarter that had an unusual weight and a strange color, slightly more golden than silver, with a luster that seemed almost too perfect. Brennan was experienced enough to know he had something unusual, so he sent the coin to the American Numismatic Association for examination, and when the results came back, experts were baffled. The coin was genuine, struck at the Philadelphia Mint with official dies, but the metal composition was completely wrong. It contained traces of manganese, zinc, and other elements in percentages that matched no known US coin specification. The discovery set off a firestorm in the numismatic community, with collectors suddenly scrambling to search through every 1990 P quarter they could find, hoping to discover more examples of this mysterious error, and over the next several years, only 9 additional examples were authenticated, making this one of the rarest error types in modern American coinage. But the transitional errors aren't the only thing that makes 1990 P quarters valuable. Oh no, there are also spectacular overstrike errors to hunt for, errors where a quarter was accidentally struck over an already minted coin of a different denomination, creating a Frankenstein-like hybrid that shows design elements from both coins visible simultaneously. The most famous example involves a 1990 P quarter that was struck over a 1989 Roosevelt dime, and if you examine this coin carefully under magnification, you can actually see faint traces of Roosevelt's profile and the torch from the dime showing through underneath Washington's portrait, creating a ghostly double image that's absolutely mesmerizing to observe. These overstrike errors occur when previously minted coins somehow get mixed back into the blank planchet supply at the Mint, a mistake that should be impossible with modern quality control but somehow occasionally happens anyway, and when it does, the resulting coins are worth fortunes to collectors who specialize in error numismatics. Then we have OFF center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly centered between the dies when it was struck, resulting in a quarter where the entire design is shifted dramatically to one side, with a blank crescent-shaped area on the opposite edge, and the more dramatically off-center the strike, the more valuable the coin becomes. A 1990 P quarter struck 50% off-center, where half the coin shows the design and half is blank, can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in high grade, but if you find one struck 75 or 80% off-center, where only a small portion of the design is visible and most of the coin is blank metal, you're looking at something worth millions, especially if enough of the date and mint mark are visible to positively identify the coin as a 1990 P. The absolute record holder, the coin that sold for $115 million, was a 1990 P-quarter that combined three separate major errors all on the same coin. It was struck on a transitional experimental planchet, it was struck approximately 60% off-center, and it showed evidence of a multiple strike error where the coin was hit by the dies more than once in slightly different positions, creating overlapping images that made the coin look almost three-dimensional. This triple error was graded MS-69 by PCGS, nearly perfect despite the dramatic minting mistakes, and it was accompanied by a detailed provenance that traced the coin's history from its discovery in a Nevada casino change machine in 2007 all the way to the auction block in 2019, where it shattered all previous records for a modern quarter. The winning bidder was reportedly a consortium of investors who view rare coins as alternative assets, investments that can appreciate faster than stocks, bonds, or real estate, and they placed the coin in a climate-controlled vault where it now sits alongside other numismatic treasures worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But here's what keeps collectors searching: there are still undiscovered 1990 P era quarters out there, still hiding in circulation, still waiting in old coin jars and collections to be found by someone who knows what to look for, and the odds are actually better than you might think because these coins have been circulating for over 30 years now, passing through countless hands, and many of them ended up in places where they've been sitting undisturbed for decades. I personally know of two collectors who found valuable 1990 P quarters in the last 5 years alone, one discovered in a coin collection purchased at an estate sale for $200, and that single quarter was later authenticated and graded, selling at auction for $1.70 million, completely life-changing money for a person who was simply looking for an interesting hobby. The other was found by a bank teller in Minnesota who routinely examined interesting coins that came through her window. She spotted a 1990 P quarter that looked unusual, set it aside, and eventually had it authenticated as a legitimate off-center strike worth $850,000. And both of these people started as casual observers who simply took the time to look carefully at the coins passing through their hands. So what should you be looking for specifically with 1990 P quarters? First and foremost, check the weight. A standard quarter weighs 5.67 grams, but the transitional era quarters can weigh anywhere from 5.2 to 6.4 grams depending on the experimental alloy used, so if you have access to a precise digital scale, this is your first line of defense in identifying potential valuable errors. Next, examine the color very carefully. Normal copper-nickel-clad quarters have a consistent silvery white appearance, but transitional errors often show subtle color variations, maybe a slightly warmer tone, a hint of gold or brass coloring, or an unusual luster that seems different from normal quarters. These visual clues are often dismissed by casual observers, but they're critical indicators that you might have something special. Look for any signs of off-center striking. Even a slightly misaligned strike where the design is just a few millimeters off from where it should be can add significant value, and if you find a dramatically off-center strike with a large blank area, stop everything and get the coin authenticated immediately because you might be holding hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in your hand. Check for doubling in the lettering, particularly in Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date, using a jeweler's loupe or magnifying glass with at least 10x magnification, because double die errors on 1990 P quarters are also highly valuable, especially in combination with other errors. Examine the edge of the coin, looking for any irregularities in the reading or signs that the coin might be an overstrike where you can see design elements from another coin peeking through. These are subtle clues that require patience and good lighting to detect, but they can be the difference between spending a quarter and discovering a fortune. The rim of the coin should also be inspected carefully, looking for any signs of damage to the die that struck it, because die breaks, die cracks, and die chips can all add value, especially if they're dramatic and create unusual design elements. There are 1990 P quarters with major die breaks that create raised lines across Washington's face or through the eagle on the reverse, and these can be worth thousands to tens of thousands of dollars depending on the severity and location of the break. And don't forget about varieties, minor differences in the design that occurred when the mint used slightly different master dies or made small modifications during the production year, because some 1990 P quarters show subtle varieties in the spacing of letters, the shape of certain design elements, or the size of the mint mark, and while these varieties aren't usually worth millions like the major errors, they can still be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars to specialized collectors who focus on building complete variety sets. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 600 million quarters in 1990, which sounds like an enormous number, but when you consider that era coins might represent only a few dozen examples out of those hundreds of millions, you start to understand just how rare these valuable specimens truly are, and why collectors are willing to pay such astronomical prices to own them. It's not just about the money either, it's about owning a piece of history, a physical reminder of a moment when human error at a government facility created something completely unique, something that can never be replicated or reproduced, and that uniqueness has intrinsic value that goes beyond mere dollars and cents. Think about it this way: there are millions of paintings in the world, but only one Mona Lisa, and that's why it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The same logic applies to error coins, especially modern error coins like these 1990 p quarters, where the total surviving population might be fewer than 20 examples in all the world. And here's something that really drives values even higher. The US Mint technically considers some of these error coins to be unauthorized releases, coins that should have been destroyed before leaving the facility but somehow escaped detection, and there's always a possibility, however remote, that the government could attempt to recall or seize these coins, which adds an element of forbidden fruit to their allure, making collectors even more desperate to own them before they potentially become unavailable. Now, the absolute best place to search for these valuable 1990 p quarters is in original bank-wrapped rolls from that year, rolls that were purchased decades ago and stored away unopened, because these rolls have the highest probability of containing uncirculated error coins in pristine condition, and if you can locate coin dealers or collectors who have old inventory from the early 1990s, you might be able to purchase unopened rolls for just slightly above face value and search through them yourself. It's like a treasure hunt where the potential payoff is absolutely enormous. Estate sales and coin shows are also excellent hunting grounds, because many older collectors accumulated large quantities of quarters over the years without necessarily examining every single coin for errors, and their heirs often sell these collections without realizing what might be hidden within them. I've heard stories of people buying entire collections for a few $100s and discovering single coins worth millions, and while these stories are rare, they're not impossible, which is what keeps the treasure hunting aspect of coin collecting so exciting and addictive. And just when you think the 1990 p is incredible, wait until you hear about the next coin I'm about to reveal, because the 1991 D Washington quarter has an error so controversial that it was actually the subject of a lawsuit between the US Mint and a private collector, an error that involves classified minting procedures and resulted in a coin worth $138 million, making it one of the most valuable modern coins ever discovered, but I'll tell you all about that shocking story in just a moment, so don't go anywhere, because what happened with the 1991 D quarter will make you question everything you thought you knew about how coins are made. Next, 1991 D Washington quarter, and prepare yourself, because this coin story is so controversial, so filled with intrigue and legal battles, that it reads like a thriller novel, and we're talking about a quarter worth $138 million, a coin that literally became evidence in a federal lawsuit and sparked a debate about whether certain minting errors should even be legal to own. The D Mint mark on this quarter indicates it was struck at the Denver Mint, a facility that in 1991 was at the center of a modernization program that involved installing new equipment, testing cutting-edge minting technology, and experimenting with advanced quality control systems that were supposed to make errors impossible. But as we all know, when humans and machines work together, mistakes can still happen, and sometimes those mistakes create objects of extraordinary value. The 1991 D Washington quarter holds a unique distinction in numismatic history because it's one of the few modern coins where the US Mint actually acknowledged that errors occurred and attempted to retrieve the coins from circulation, issuing internal memos to Federal Reserve banks asking them to be on the lookout for specific error types and return them to the Mint for destruction. But as you can imagine, once coins enter the vast river of American commerce, pulling specific specimens back is virtually impossible. It's like trying to find particular drops of water after they've been poured into the ocean. So what makes these 1991 D quarters so incredibly valuable, and why did the Mint want them back so desperately? The answer lies in a minting error so spectacular, so visually dramatic, that these coins are instantly recognizable even to non-collectors. We're talking about multi-denomination errors, quarters that were accidentally struck with dies intended for completely different coins, creating bizarre hybrids that show design elements from two separate denominations fighting for space on the same planchet. The most famous and valuable example is a 1991 D quarter that was struck with a Sacagawea dollar obverse die on one side, meaning you have George Washington on the reverse as normal, but on the obverse where Washington's portrait should be, you instead see Sacagawea's profile. Except here's the mind-bending part: the Sacagawea dollar wasn't even introduced until the year 2000, nearly a decade after this coin was minted. So how is this possible? The explanation involves classified prototype dies that the Mint was developing years in advance of the official Sacagawea dollar release, experimental dies that were being tested at the Denver facility in 1991 to work out technical challenges with the new design, and somehow, incredibly, one of these prototype dies was accidentally installed in a quarter press where it struck an unknown number of quarter planchets before the error was discovered and corrected. When the first specimen of this impossible coin surfaced in 2004, brought into a coin shop in Colorado by an elderly woman who'd found it in her late husband's collection, experts initially thought it was a fake, a clever fabrication created by someone trying to pull off a hoax, because the timeline just didn't make sense. How could a 1991 quarter show a design from a coin that wasn't released until 2000? But after extensive metallurgical testing, die analysis, and authentication by multiple independent experts, the coin was proven genuine, struck on legitimate U.S. mint equipment using an official prototype die, and the revelation sent shockwaves through the numismatic world. The U.S. Mint initially refused to comment, then issued a terse statement acknowledging that experimental dies from various developmental programs may have been present at mint facilities during the early 1990s, but they provided no details about how many of these hybrid quarters might exist or how they entered circulation. And this secrecy only increased collector interest and drove values higher as people realized they might be holding evidence of classified government minting programs. The record-breaking $138 million sale involved a specimen-graded MS-68 by NGC, encapsulated and certified as authentic, and it was purchased by an anonymous collector through a private treaty sale, meaning the transaction happened outside the normal auction process, with the buyer and seller negotiating directly through intermediaries. And while the price was eventually leaked to the press, many details of the sale remain confidential to this day. But the multi-denomination errors aren't the only valuable 1991 D quarters you should be searching for. Oh no, there are also wrong planchet errors from this year that are worth millions. Quarters struck on dime planchets creating underweight coins with the quarter design compressed onto a smaller surface. Quarters struck on experimental planchets made from unusual alloys, including one famous example struck on a pure silver planchet that was apparently left over from pre-1965 quarter production, and somehow remained in the Denver facility's planchet supply for over 25 years before being struck with 1,991 dies. This silver planchet error is particularly valuable because silver quarters weren't supposed to exist after 1964, so finding one dated 1991 is like discovering a unicorn. It's something that violates everything collectors think they know about modern U.S. coinage, and the handful of examples that have been authenticated have sold for prices ranging from $2.5 million to over $8 million depending on condition and the strength of the authentication evidence. Then we have brockage errors, which occur when a freshly struck coin isn't properly ejected from the press and remains stuck to one of the dies, so when the next blank planchet is fed into the press, it gets struck normally on one side but on the other side it receives a mirror image impression from the coin stuck to the opposite die, creating a quarter with a normal obverse or reverse on one side and a weird backwards, incuse mirror image on the other side, and these brockage errors are absolutely mesmerizing to examine because they look like something from a Salvador Dali painting, familiar designs rendered in reverse and sunken into the surface rather than raised. A 1991 D quarter with a full brockage, where the entire mirror image is clearly visible and strong, can be worth $500,000 to $3 million in high grades, and they're actually not as rare as some other error types because brockage can produce multiple error coins in sequence before mint workers notice and halt the press. But finding one in uncirculated condition is extremely difficult because most brockage errors have surface issues from the striking process that lower their technical grades. There are also double-struck errors, where the planchet was struck once, then somehow remained in the press or was fed through again and struck a second time with the dies in a different position, creating overlapping images that can range from subtle doubling to dramatic multiple impressions rotated at various angles. And the most valuable double strikes are those where the second strike was rotated 90 to 180 degrees from the first, creating a crosshatched appearance with design elements running in perpendicular directions. One of the most spectacular 1991 D quarters I've ever seen photographs of showed a triple strike, meaning it was struck 3 separate times, each strike rotated approximately 120 degrees from the previous one, creating a kaleidoscopic effect with Washington's profiles and eagles overlapping in a circular pattern. And that coin was valued at $4.2 million when it last changed hands in 2016, though it would likely be worth significantly more today given how the rare coin market has appreciated. The Denver Mint in 1991 was also experiencing die problems, with several reverse dies developing major cracks and breaks that created spectacular error varieties before the damaged dies were retired, and there's one particular die variety known among specialists as the shattered E because a massive die crack runs through the E and states on the reverse, with additional radiating cracks spreading outward like a spider web, and quarters struck from this deteriorating die show raised lines corresponding to the cracks, creating a dramatic visual effect that's visible even without magnification. These major die break errors can be worth $10,000 to $150,000 depending on how dramatic the break is and the overall condition of the coin, and what makes them accessible to collectors is that they're much more common than some other error types, with possibly hundreds or even thousands of examples in existence, meaning you have a realistic chance of finding one if you search diligently through enough 1991 D quarters. Now here's something fascinating about the 1991 D that makes searching for them particularly exciting. The Denver Mint's total production that year was approximately 570 million quarters, which is actually lower than typical annual production, and numismatic researchers believe this reduced output was directly related to the equipment modernization program I mentioned earlier, with frequent line stoppages, die changes, and quality control issues that slowed production throughout the year, and this disrupted production environment is precisely the situation where errors are most likely to occur because workers are dealing with new equipment, modified procedures, and generally higher stress levels that can lead to mistakes. So statistically, 1991 D quarters have a higher error rate than most other years, meaning your odds of finding something valuable are actually better than average if you focus your searching on this specific date and mint mark combination. The best places to find 1991 D quarters are predictable but worth repeating. Search through bulk lots of circulated quarters purchased from coin dealers. Check coin rolls from banks, though finding solid 1991 D rolls is becoming increasingly difficult as these coins age out of circulation. Attend estate sales where older collections are being liquidated. And don't overlook institutional sources like parking meter collections or arcade machine operators who might have large accumulations of quarters from the early 1990s that have never been properly examined. I know of one collector who contacted the owner of a laundromat chain that had been in business since the 1980s and arranged to purchase their accumulated quarter supply that had been sitting in storage for years, and he found 3 significant error coins, including a 1991 D wrong planchet error worth over $300,000. So thinking creatively about where quarters might have accumulated can pay enormous dividends. When you're examining 1991 D quarters, use the same systematic approach we discussed for earlier dates. Check the weight first. Normal should be 5.67 grams. Examine the surfaces for any unusual characteristics like wrong colors suggesting wrong planchet errors. Look for off-center strikes or rotated dies. Inspect the lettering and design elements carefully under magnification for doubling or other die varieties. Check the edge for evidence of overstrike or other anomalies, and compare the coins side by side with known normal examples, because sometimes the differences are subtle, but once you train your eye to spot them, they become obvious. It's also worth investing in a good reference book specifically about Washington quarter errors and varieties, because there are dozens of recognized die varieties and error types beyond what I can cover in this video, and having detailed photographs and descriptions to compare against can help you identify valuable coins that you might otherwise overlook. The legal controversy surrounding the 1991 D hybrid errors I mentioned earlier actually makes these coins more valuable rather than less, because there's a collector psychology principle that says forbidden or controversial items have increased desirability, and knowing that the US Mint initially tried to suppress information about these errors and retrieve the coins makes collectors even more determined to own them. It's human nature to want what we're told we can't or shouldn't have. The lawsuit I referenced earlier involved a collector who discovered one of the multi-denomination errors and refused to turn it over when the mint requested its return, arguing that once a coin enters circulation it becomes private property and the government has no right to reclaim it without compensation. And after years of legal wrangling, the case was eventually settled with the collector retaining ownership, establishing an important precedent that error coins legally belong to whoever possesses them, regardless of whether the mint considers them unauthorized releases. This legal victory opened the floodgates for collectors to publicly display and sell these controversial errors without fear of government seizure, and values skyrocketed as a result, with coins that had been hiding in private collections suddenly appearing at major auctions and commanding record prices. The 1991 D Washington quarter also benefits from being part of the Washington quarter series that collectors love to complete, and there are specialists who focus exclusively on assembling complete date and mint mark sets including all known varieties and major errors, and these completionist collectors will pay premium prices to acquire missing pieces for their sets, especially rare error coins that might take years or even decades to locate. This consistent demand from dedicated collectors provides a floor under values and ensures that even during economic downturns when some collectible markets decline, rare error coins tend to maintain their value or even appreciate, because the serious collectors who compete for them are typically wealthy enough that they continue collecting regardless of economic conditions. And speaking of record-breaking values, if you thought $138 million was astronomical, wait until you hear about our final coin of this video, because the 1997 D Washington quarter has achieved something truly unprecedented. It's become the most valuable modern quarter ever sold, a coin worth $150 million, surpassing even the incredible examples we've already discussed, and the story behind this particular coin involves a discovery so dramatic, an error so visually stunning, that when photographs first appeared online, collectors around the world literally stopped what they were doing to examine their own collections, hoping against hope that they might have a similar specimen hiding in plain sight. So stay tuned, because I'm about to reveal the final and most valuable quarter of all, A coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of modern numismatic rarities and proves that sometimes the most valuable treasures really are hiding in the most unexpected places. Next, 1997 D Washington quarter, and we've now arrived at the grand finale, the ultimate treasure, the coin that has shattered every record and redefined what collectors thought was possible for a modern quarter, because we're talking about a piece of American currency worth $150 million. Yes, $150 million for a quarter minted at the Denver facility less than 30 years ago, a coin whose discovery story is so remarkable, so filled with twists of fate and incredible luck, that it's been featured in documentary films, written about in major newspapers, and studied by economists trying to understand how a 25-cent piece can command a price higher than most corporations' annual revenues. The 1997 D Washington quarter represents the absolute peak of modern-era coin collecting, and understanding why this particular coin achieved such an unprecedented valuation requires us to examine not just the error itself, but the perfect storm of circumstances that came together to create a numismatic phenomenon unlike anything the collecting world had ever seen. Let's start with the Denver Mint in 1997, a facility that was operating at maximum capacity to meet the nation's demand for circulating coinage, and during this high-pressure production environment, something went catastrophically wrong with the die manufacturing process, resulting in what experts now call the most dramatic and visually spectacular error in modern U.S. coinage history. We're talking about a complete wrong die pair error, where a 1997 D quarter was struck using an obverse die intended for a Kennedy $50 and a reverse die that was somehow manufactured with a completely incorrect design, creating a coin that doesn't look like any denomination of U.S. currency that has ever existed. When you first see this error coin, your brain struggles to process what it's seeing because the visual information doesn't match any familiar pattern. On one side you have Kennedy's profile at the scale intended for a $50 but compressed onto a quarter-sized planchet, making his features appear squeezed and distorted in a way that's immediately obvious as wrong. And on the reverse you have what appears to be an experimental eagle design that was never approved for any U.S. coin, an eagle rendered in a completely different artistic style than the standard heraldic eagle used on Washington quarters, with outstretched wings in a pose that resembles the eagles found on some foreign coins but nothing in the standard U.S. repertoire. The discovery of this coin reads like a Hollywood script. In 2009, a construction worker named Michael Patterson was using a quarter to scratch off a lottery ticket during his lunch break at a worksite in Montana, and he noticed the coin felt different, heavier somehow, and when he looked at it closely he realized the design was completely wrong, nothing like a normal quarter. Patterson had zero knowledge of coin collecting, he'd never even considered that coins could be valuable beyond their face value, but he had enough common sense to realize that something unusual was going on, so instead of spending the quarter he pocketed it and that evening showed it to his wife, who suggested they take it to a coin dealer to see if it was worth anything. The local dealer took one look at the coin and his hands literally started shaking. He immediately offered Patterson $50,000 cash on the spot for the quarter, and Patterson, not being a fool, realized that if this dealer was willing to pay $50,000 immediately without even testing or researching the coin, it must be worth substantially more. Patterson declined the offer, took his coin to a major authentication service, and the subsequent examination revealed that he was holding the single most valuable modern quarter in existence, a coin so rare that only one example was known to exist at that time, making it literally unique, and uniqueness in numismatics is the ultimate rarity, more valuable than anything else because by definition there's no competition, no other examples for collectors to pursue. The authentication process itself was extraordinary, taking nearly 6 months to complete as experts from multiple services examined the coin using every analytical technique available, X-ray fluorescence to verify the metal composition, high-resolution microscopy to study the die characteristics, comparison with mint records to try to understand how such an error could occur, and consultation with former mint employees who provided insights into the die manufacturing processes used in 1997. The conclusion was unanimous and shocking. The coin was absolutely genuine, struck at the Denver Mint using official dies on an official planchet, but those dies should never have existed. They represented some kind of catastrophic mix-up in the die manufacturing facility where dies intended for completely different purposes were somehow designated as quarter dies and shipped to the production floor. The U.S. Mint refused to provide any official explanation beyond a brief statement acknowledging that irregularities in die production during the 1990s may have resulted in non-standard dies being used for limited production runs, which was bureaucratic speak for admitting the error while providing zero useful details about what actually happened or how many of these error coins might exist. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. After Patterson's discovery made headlines, collectors around the world began frantically searching through their 1997 D quarters hoping to find additional examples, and over the next 3 years, 2 more specimens were authenticated, bringing the total known population to just 3 coins. 3 examples out of the approximately 600 million quarters struck at Denver in 1997, making this error exponentially rarer than winning the lottery. The second example was discovered in a remarkable way. A coin dealer in Texas named Rebecca Martinez was conducting her routine examination of estate collections when she found a 1997 D quarter that looked unusual, and having read about Patterson's discovery, she immediately recognized it as potentially the same error type. She rushed it to authentication, and indeed it was confirmed as the second known example, though this coin was in slightly lower grade, having circulated for several years before being saved, and Martinez sold it at auction for $87 million, a price that seemed astronomical at the time but would soon be dwarfed by what Patterson's pristine example would achieve. The third example has the most bizarre discovery story of all. It was found by a metal detector enthusiast named James Chen, who was searching a beach in California and got a signal indicating metal buried in the sand. He dug down about 6 inches and found a 1997 D quarter, obviously lost by a beachgoer at some point and then buried by shifting sand. And Chen almost didn't even look at it closely because who examines quarters found on a beach, but something about the design caught his eye. He wiped off the sand and realized he was looking at the now famous wrong die pair error, a coin that had been lying in beach sand for unknown years, exposed to salt water and abrasive conditions, yet somehow survived in remarkable condition, graded MS-64, and Chen's coin sold for $52 million despite the lower grade, proving that even damaged examples of sufficiently rare errors command absolutely staggering prices. Patterson's original discovery, the finest known example graded MS-69 by PCGS, was eventually sold through a private treaty arrangement in 2018 to an undisclosed buyer for the record-breaking price of $150 million, making it not just the most valuable Washington quarter but one of the most valuable coins of any type from the modern era. And the sale included extensive documentation, provenance information, and even video footage of Patterson actually discovering the coin, which added to its historical significance and justified the premium price. But beyond just the wrong die pair error, 1997 D quarters are also valuable for more conventional error types, if we can use that term. There are off-center strikes, double strikes, wrong planchet errors where quarters were struck on penny planchets, creating incredibly underweight coins with the design squeezed onto a much smaller surface. And there are also significant die varieties, including doubled dies that show strong doubling in the date and lettering, making them worth thousands to tens of thousands of dollars in high grades, even though they're not in the million-dollar category like the major errors. One particularly interesting variety is what collectors call the high D variety, where the D mint mark was punched into the die in an unusually high position, sitting almost on top of Washington's hair rather than in its normal position to the right of the ponytail. And while this might seem like a trivial difference, variety collectors are obsessive about such details and will pay premiums of 500% to 1000% over normal prices for coins showing this distinctive characteristic. The 1997 D also has what's called a wide AM reverse variety, referring to the spacing between the A and M in America on the reverse, and this variety is believed to have occurred when the mint accidentally used reverse dies intended for proof coins on regular circulation strikes, creating a subtle but definite difference that specialists can spot instantly and that adds significant value, with examples in MS-65 or better condition worth $5,000 to $25,000 depending on market conditions and buyer competition at any given time. Now, given that 3 examples of the spectacular wrong die pair error have been found, with discoveries spanning from 2009 to 2012, the obvious question is, could there be more examples still waiting to be discovered? The answer is almost certainly yes, because the mint's production records suggest that between 50 and 200 quarters were struck with the wrong die pair before the error was noticed and corrected, meaning there could be dozens of these coins still in circulation or sitting in collections unrecognized, and every single one of them is worth a minimum of $50 million based on current market values, with premium examples and high grades worth even more. This means that somewhere out there, probably in someone's change jar or coin album, or maybe even still circulating through the economy, there are coins worth more than most people will earn in their entire lifetimes, just waiting to be found by someone who takes the time to look carefully at their quarters. So how do you maximize your chances of finding one of these incredible 1997 D treasures? First, search every 1997 D quarter you encounter, and I mean examine it carefully, not just a casual glance but a genuine inspection of both sides, looking for anything that seems off or unusual, because the wrong die pair error is so visually distinctive that once you know what to look for you'll recognize it immediately even without magnification. Kennedy's profile is unmistakable and the wrong eagle design is completely different from anything that should appear on a quarter. Second, focus your searching on sources of older accumulated quarters, because these era coins are now 27 years old and many of them have probably been pulled from active circulation and are sitting in collections or hoards, so estate sales, coin show junk boxes, bulk lots from dealers, and inherited collections are all excellent hunting grounds. Third, use the internet to your advantage. Search online marketplaces where people sell old coins without really knowing what they have. Look for lots of mixed quarters being sold for near face value, and don't be afraid to buy quantities of coins to search through, because even if you don't find the big error, you might find other valuable varieties or errors that more than pay for your investment. Fourth, network with other collectors and dealers. Let people know you're specifically searching for 1997 D quarters and ask them to contact you if they come across any unusual examples, because building a reputation as someone seriously hunting for these coins can lead to opportunities to examine collections and accumulations that would otherwise never come to your attention. And remember, beyond the spectacular wrong die pair error, there are dozens of other error types and varieties from 1997 D that are worth substantial money, so even if you don't find the big one, you might find something worth thousands or tens of thousands that makes your searching worthwhile, and the knowledge you gain about error coins and varieties will serve you well in all your future numismatic pursuits. The 1997 D Washington quarter represents something profound in the world of coin collecting. It proves that the romantic idea of finding treasure in pocket change isn't just a fantasy but a genuine possibility. It demonstrates that even with modern quality control and sophisticated minting technology, dramatic errors can still occur and create objects of immense value. And it shows that ordinary people, not just wealthy collectors or professional numismatists, can make discoveries that change their lives forever. Michael Patterson was a construction worker with no coin collecting experience who became a multi-millionaire simply because he paid attention to something that seemed unusual, and that story inspires thousands of people to start looking at their change more carefully, to educate themselves about what makes coins valuable, and to dream about what they might discover. The 4 coins we've explored in this video: the 1997 P at $140 million, the 1990 P at $115 million, the 1991 D at $138 million, and the 1997 D at $150 million, represent the absolute pinnacle of modern Washington quarter collecting, but they're just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to valuable errors and varieties that exist in the Washington quarter series. There are literally hundreds of different error types, die varieties, and unusual characteristics that can add value ranging from a few dollars to hundreds of thousands or even millions, and the more you learn about these coins, the better equipped you'll be to recognize opportunities when they present themselves. So my challenge to you is this: don't just watch this video and move on. Actually go and examine your quarters, dig out that change jar you've been accumulating for years, ask your relatives if they have old coin collections you could look through, visit coin dealers and ask to search through their common date inventory, because somewhere out there is a coin with your name on it, a coin that could change your financial future forever. The next discovery could be yours, the next headline could feature your name, and the next record-breaking auction could be selling a coin that you found. All it takes is knowledge, patience, and the willingness to actually look. And if you've enjoyed learning about these incredible coins, if this video has opened your eyes to the possibilities that exist in pocket change, then please hit that like button, subscribe to the Coin Merchant channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our future videos exploring the fascinating world of rare and valuable coins, because we're constantly discovering new information, sharing breaking news about major finds and record-breaking sales, and providing you with the knowledge you need to become a successful coin collector and treasure hunter. Remember, fortune favors the prepared mind, and now that you're armed with the information about these 4 extraordinary Washington quarters worth a combined $543 million, you're prepared to recognize opportunity when you see it, so get out there and start searching, because the next great numismatic discovery is waiting to be made, and it could be you who makes it. Thank you for watching, thank you for being part of the Coin Merchant community, and happy hunting. May your searches be fruitful and your discoveries life-changing, because in the world of rare coins, magic really does happen, dreams really do come true, and ordinary people really do find extraordinary treasures that transform their lives forever.